Welcome to a new edition of the program Realities and Perspective. Today we have a special guest, Dr. John Garmo. Welcome, John, to our programs. And our desire is to talk with you and to answer to many questions to our viewers connected with character, integrity in a daily life, in a public area, in a church, in our daily work from Monday to Saturday. So this will be the topics. But because we are for the first time in our studio, for our viewers, we want to find few things about you and about your ministry.
Well, thank you so very much for inviting me to be here. It's a privilege to serve alongside you, and I hope and pray that our conversation will really be encouraging to those who are watching. I also hope that it's going to be comforting, so it will give them a sense of direction about how to live Monday through Saturday, just as I need direction in my life to live Monday through Saturday.
Because the character will be one of the subjects that we talk from different perspectives. Can you have a definition? What means character?
The way that we describe character when we're explaining it to people in any of the many countries we've been able to serve in is that character is a group of values that we choose that make a difference in our moral and our ethical actions and also our reactions when others do things against us.
You're traveling a lot. Maybe you can say a few words about the area that you serve the Lord. Maybe this character, if you say you choose to live, maybe it's a different approach in different areas, maybe here in Romania or in South Africa or in Indonesia or I don't know. You can talk about this as a cultural issue or it's a biblical issue?
That's a good question. It seems that it would be very different if you're in Asia, for example, Japan, or if you're in Africa, maybe Liberia, or if you're in South America, perhaps Bolivia, where I used to live as a young boy. The reality is this. We have visual differences when we go to different countries. I am European, and it shows. I don't look at all African, and I don't look South American or Asian. But that's just a surface detail. That's how we may see each other. Even culturally, the behavior systems that you and I have learned from childhood, or that a person from Indonesia learns from childhood, may be distinctive from other groups of people, but that's simply something that we learn, so it's superficial. Who we really are is the same no matter where we are. What I have seen and really embraced is a firm conviction in my understanding of people is that it does not matter where we are. It does not matter whether we are wealthy or poor. It doesn't matter if we are famous or absolutely unknown. We are all people who have some of the same needs. We have some of the same weaknesses, but also some of the same capacities to do things in a way that is excellent. And on a basic level, what is excellent in Asia is going to be excellent in South America. The reason is because life is mostly about relationships, and we focus a lot on relationships. At the end of my life, I'm not going to be thinking about business achievements or places I've visited. I'm going to be thinking about family and friends. Relationships are what life is all about. Character is a core part of those relationships. And so we're very much alike no matter where we come from.
Many Romania was said it's easy for Dr. John Garmo. I know people are calling you Skip. Okay. And please told me, Tudor, can you say you skip during this program? People here in Romania said, oh, maybe it's easy to manifest your character, your integrity in a country when you have enough money, maybe in the states that you come from. For us here in Romania, it's not so easy. We have to make some compromise, let's say, in order to survive. Maybe you can have a preliminary answer to this question. It's easy to manifest your character, your integrity in the States or in other countries than in Romania? Talking about these two areas as an example.
I wish it were only in Romania, but the reality again is that these are issues that we have challenges with no matter where we live. Those who I know who have been very wealthy, and stories of people that I have read who are very wealthy show that they have the same weakness in integrity, the same temptation to compromise integrity that the rest of us do, because people who have lots of fame, for example, always want a little bit more fame, to become more famous. People who have lots of money always seem to want a little bit more money. An athlete always wants to play a little bit longer than he's able or than she is able to play in that sport. We all want more than we have. That's one of the basic issues for us, and it forces us to test our character in matters like integrity.
Maybe some Christians in Romania, they will said after these few minutes of introductory discussion, see, the word character or the word integrity is not in my Bible translation. Here it's a program in a Christian studio. Why you touch these subjects who are not in the Bible? Maybe you can have an answer to these questions.
The word character does come into the Bible in, as we understand the Greek in the New Testament and the Hebrew in the Old Testament. That may sound very technical, but in a practical way, there are certain passages of the Bible that jump out to us and say, imitate the character of Jesus. Imitate the character of Jesus. In 1 Corinthians 13, for example, the Apostle Paul, who was the spokesman as God's Spirit spoke to him, wrote this letter to a church in Corinth saying, I've told you all these things about God, and I've told you these things about ways that God, through His Spirit, enables you to serve each other. But in 1 Corinthians 13, he says, now I'm going to tell you what matters more than anything to God. It's love. It is, the Greek word agape was a very special word, and that's the unique word that is used for love in that passage and throughout the New Testament. As we look at 1 Corinthians 13, what comes as ways that demonstrate that we have God's love in our hearts is our character. Because he says, he being Paul, God led him to say, if God's love is in your heart, you are going to be patient. If God's love is in your heart, you're going to forgive others, even when they've offended you deeply. If God's love is in your heart, you are going to be a truth teller. That is, you will have integrity, because truthfulness is one of the ways that we demonstrate integrity. Even in the Old Testament, we see in, let's say, the book of Proverbs, for example, time after time, how God uses those verses of Scripture to call us to be men and women who speak the truth and choose our words carefully so that we do not deceive others. So it's there throughout the Scriptures, and once we understand that, Scriptures come alive in terms of helping us understand what it means to imitate the character of Jesus.
This is an important explanation, because finally people will say, okay, we follow this program, and because it's a biblical discussion, it's not something, a technical discussion or a discussion that takes place only in society.
Yeah. It's very practical. You're absolutely right.
I want to ask you, coming back to your ministry, your values, because your ministry is a character solution. And I saw the logo of your ministry, it's very significant. Maybe you can explain it in 2 or 3 minutes. What means the logo of your ministry? Because this is significant for what you are doing.
I will do that. I will also say briefly that Character Solutions was basically born, Character Solutions was born in Romania. About 2003 was the first year that I came as part of a team to teach some of these values. And by 2004, we realized that we need to establish a specific organization to help do this in churches where we use the Bible, but also in the world around us. For example, in education for teachers in public schools. So the challenge was, how do we develop this in a way that can be taught conveniently and taught well in church with the Bible, but also taught on a more general level, even in public schools, so that as children grow up through the schools of Romania, they become men and women who more and more will embrace those values that make a big, big difference personally for them, but also make a big difference in their relationships with others. The logo that we have developed for Character Solutions involves two key parts. One is a compass. Anybody who's been lost in a forest is very thankful for a compass. Just see trees around us, we don't know how to get home. Well, the compass points us in directions that will help us make the right decision. Character does that too, because much of life is not clear. We cannot see the outcomes of every single decision we're going to make, but we can see the path that we need to walk, and that will lead to outcomes that are good, and if we ignore it, that will lead to outcomes that are destructive, maybe harmful to us. So the compass is one part of what this logo is. And then inside the compass, there is a special kind of a needle. Instead of being a typical needle that you would look at in a compass that you would buy in a store, it is a tree. And it's a special kind of a tree. It's called a sequoia in a technical way. For convenience, we simply call them redwood trees because the color of the bark of a sequoia is a very dark, beautiful red. The redwood tree is remarkable in the way that God created it. Each tree in the world, oak, pine, cedar, redwood, they're all unique, just like people are unique. The differences are entertaining to explore, and you think, my goodness, God is very, very creative in how He created not only people, but trees. The redwood tree has very thick bark, and it is built of material that is very resistant to fire. So the fire comes through a forest, and if it burns down the cedars and the pine and the oak trees, the redwood tree stands the longest. It is not fireproof, but it is fire resistant. And we thought, okay, when we embrace these values, they help us resist the flow of, for example, of current opinion on certain things that we realize might be the wrong opinion, but everybody's thinking that way, and we are afraid to think any other way than the way our friends do. We said, no, we need to be able to stand strong even when thinking is different. So we want to build children, teenagers, adults who are young, adults who are my age, to stand strong and to resist those things that would destroy them. So it's a very special covering that this sequoia tree has. It also has deep roots, and another thing that makes the sequoia tree unusual is that instead of going deep, 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 deep down into the ground with a taproot, a central root, it goes out sideways and it reaches out as if to hold arms with the other trees around it. The idea that attracted me to that was that that's what we need to do also. We don't want to be men and women working on our own character separate from everybody else, but it's much more effective if we can do it as a group, as 2 or 3 people together. We can be a grove of redwood trees, learning to stand strong, make the right choices, and withstand the temptation to go into make decisions that would be harmful.
So through this logo, you summarize, in fact, your vision, your values, your work, your ministry, your desire to serve the people in this area. So we come later probably to some values and maybe related to this tree. But I mentioned from the beginning that in many churches in Romania, probably it's different in the States, I don't know, people said this discussion about character, about integrity, it's outside of the church. In the church, we talk about only holy things on Sunday morning. The rest are different. So I have your comment on this. I have also a short contribution that we want to insert. Maybe you can insert this first contribution, come back to your comments.
I think that one of the most detrimental seasons of life for the sacred secular split is for college students or for people early on a path and they're choosing at crossroads. And for me, I was that 18-year-old that was wrestling with that question. Do I want to go do this thing that I'm gifted at, that I do believe that I can really add value to the world, or do I want to really go follow Jesus? And the BAM movement, Business as Mission, is breaking that paradigm that never should have been there. You know, if you look historically at the early days of the church, all of the cultural leading, all of the things, the hospitals, the art, the businesses in place, they were all coming out of the church. The church was leading in all of these areas, but we've just lost that. And I don't know when, but this great separation now exists. And so the church in America is slowly waking up to this. But I mean, specifically, I think what you're starting to see now is that equipping the people in the marketplace, you're seeing a shift from just, in the past it was, you had to only be a pastor to minister. Well, now they're starting to realize that, hey, there's Sunday and then there's Monday through Friday. And people are only interacting with our churches on Sunday. But then you start realizing people aren't interacting with our churches at all. And so the only way to truly engage with them is to equip the marketplace leaders who are out there in the market and who are interacting with people in the world 5 days a week, 7 days a week.
It was a contribution from Mike Tiderman, a businessman from the States, about this mentality, this concept to separate in an appropriate way the church discussion, values, program to the society issues from Monday to Saturday. So what is your opinion? Maybe this discussion, some pastor or some church people will say this is not a church discussion, it's a business or society discussion about character, integrity.
Some will discuss the difference between church and state, that is the government, and treat them as enemies, I suppose. That would be an extreme position because that isn't necessarily reality. Nor are they all the same as in generations, centuries ago, where the king was also the head of the church, for example, in the United Kingdom. The truth in today's world is somewhere in between there, that we need the government to provide the supervision for people that will keep everybody safe. The goal of the government is to protect the people. It is to provide for their health, their well-being, to provide economic situations that are appropriate for businesses to grow and so forth. And that's why we need organization when we have a lot of people. And Romania has 20 million people. So if we each had no governing, it would be total chaos. So we need government. Church is to be God's voice in today's world. So the Bible speaks to how we respond to government, how we participate in government, but also beyond that, how we respond in our personal relationships, regardless of what the government's situation is. No matter what government system we're under, the Bible talks about relationships with God, first of all, my relationship with Him, but also our relationship with all of those who are around us. And God makes clear in the Bible that's what life is about, and that is the highest priority. So we want to respect government and do everything that we can to make government as helpful as possible, as truthful as possible, as strong as possible to defend against others. But we also want to focus very, very much on the personal responsibility that we have to God in our relationships with each other. Integrity is one of the main ways that we demonstrate our respect for each other. And it's one of the main ways that we demonstrate our own trustworthiness, no matter who we find ourselves with.
So in many areas they talk about skills, about being equipped as servant of God directly in the church or serving Him in other areas of society, and not exactly being a character or not is maybe not so having a character not so important. Important your skill, your ability, your education. I know you have a special illustration on this. Maybe you can talk more about this. And of course, I found in your website something from Albert Einstein. Maybe you can make a comment starting with this. Most people say that the intellect which makes a great scientist, and he continued, not exactly intellect, it's also a character.
Well, shall we start with Einstein first?
Yes, let's say Einstein, because Einstein is known in Romania.
Albert Einstein is everybody's hero. Such a bright, bright mind, and such a humble person as well. He would walk into a room and everybody would stand up, and he would look around trying to figure out who they were standing up for. It turned out to be him. But his insight went beyond physics. And one of the things that he did say is that the making of a scientist, of a great scientist, is not only intellect. Of course we need intelligence, but he says even more we need character. A higher priority. Now, why would that be? Well, as a scientist, I have a PhD, and so I've had to do my share of research. And in watching what has been reported in different fields, it becomes clear from time to time that people are dishonest about their research. A scientist is wanting very much to research certain areas or certain elements in ways that are hard for the rest of us to understand. When they report the results of their research, sometimes they're desperate for money or desperate for recognition. They want to be honored for their research. But sometimes their research has confirmed that that's not what they are trying to do is not really what they hoped it would be. It falls short of their expectations. So if they are dishonest about that, nobody is helped. That was Einstein's point, is that you have to have the integrity in the reporting of your research, but you have to have diligence in the conducting of the research. You can't simply do it, for example, on a weekend when you're done with other work. Sometimes research will take 10 experiments, maybe 100 experiments. When Thomas Edison developed light, it took him more than 1,000 experiments, but he was diligent, and that's a character value there. So those examples demonstrate the truthfulness, the reliability of what Einstein said when he made that statement.
Okay, in one of your materials on your website, It's a very simple note. Knowledge plus skill plus character means fulfillment. Knowledge plus skill, but without character means failure. Maybe you can explain this and in a simple illustration for everyone to understand. It's not only in the business area and the scientific area, it's all in the church area. Make this to be relevant for all the people, all category of people who are watching us.
Here's a way that may make it relevant for all of us, even if we are 8 years old or 80 years old. We often use symbols that I've done with children, with teens, even with university professors. So we imagine a triangle, and on one side we say, okay, this is knowledge. This side of the triangle represents skills. We have to, no matter what field that we are in, we have to keep developing our knowledge, because knowledge is changing all the time. It grows, and things that we thought were true before, as we grow in knowledge, find out, that's not true after all. So we constantly want to grow in our knowledge. The same is true of our skills, especially in the world of technology. We need to be open. In fact, we need to be committed to growing in our skills. Here's what we find out. Knowledge plus skill without that bottom line, that baseline of character, leads to collapse, leads to failure. Now, that sounds easy to say, but is that true? As a business person, I can tell you, we often hire a person because of their knowledge and skill, their competencies.
Could be also in the media area.
In the media area as well.
Or in the church area.
Yes, yeah, wherever we find ourselves, it's that way. You're absolutely right. But if we have to ask somebody to leave our organization, if we are firing them, do we fire because of competence, that is knowledge and skill? No. We fire because they have been taking money from the company, or they have been cheating on business reports, or they have been very, very rude to customers. Or maybe they've been dishonest with customers. These are all character issues that leads to the other thing that is very sobering to say is often we hire for knowledge and skill, but we fire for lack of character. So we say, while this is true, the other side of this is also true. Knowledge plus skill plus character as a foundation leads to achievement. That's how we can move forward. The athlete who has lots of knowledge and lots of skill but no character is not going to be put on the football field, because we can't trust that person to play according to the rules. A person who has knowledge and skills and character, who will play by the rules on the football field, we want that person to be on our team. And it's like that in business, it's like that, as you said, in media, in education, in church life, in family life.
In business, and politics, because
politics.
This is it's a very simple explanation, because we see the lack of integrity and character in all the segments of society, and what are the solution? Mm-hmm. Can advance a little bit. The issues related to character could be educated. You can be born with or without character, or you have to develop to grow in character. Mm-hmm. What is maybe some people said, oh, I was born like this. This is my heritage. My parents was like this. I am like this. What could be done? Because maybe some people get panicked now after the discussion. They realize that this is an issue with them or with a person that work with. What could be done? I
have heard exactly what you have said. People say, Dr. Skip or Dr. John, I can't change my character. I was born this way. And
part of my genetic heritage.
That's right, yeah. My DNA says this is how I'm going to be.
I cannot say the truth because this Yes.
That's right.
It's my blood.
It's convenient to say that, but that is not taking personal responsibility. God calls on us to take personal responsibility for certain things in our life, and one of those is our own integrity. So we have to tell the truth, we have to understand the truth, and walk in a way that is in harmony with reality. You talk about perspectives and realities. That's a reality right there. We cannot pretend that our character is our grandparents' fault. There are two aspects that are true in life. We each have personalities. Some people, even from the time that they are young children, are very outgoing. They're always playing with others. Others who are the same age, they're kind of back and they're, looking at pictures, and when they can read, they start to read while others are playing. They're more studious. That's part of their personality. And personalities do come at birth. They can be developed and they can be modified, because anybody who's quiet can be very talkative in certain social situations. And people who are very, very sociable can also be quiet when they're in the library or something. So we modify a little bit, but we still are the same personalities throughout our life. You and I are the same people we were as young children. We just know a little bit more and have had more experience and so forth. Character is different, because you recall that we talked about character as a set of values that we choose. So at any age, as a young man of 16, I can make one of my core values being very popular. So I do whatever it takes, and I move other people out of my way, whatever way for me to be very popular. But then maybe at age 20, I realize that was a foolish choice. That is not a value I better focus on. I need to focus on honoring others so that they'll be happy to be on my team when we're doing things, whether it's working together as a team, or whether it's being in church together, or being in a family together. So we choose values, and we can change our choices and decide what we feel is so important to us that we are going to embrace those. The situation is that in our heart, if we were going to conceptualize that as our heart, the center of our body, we take certain values into our heart. Those affect our attitudes. Because if I think this is important, then my attitude is I'm going to pay attention to what's important. And if that's true, then in what I say or what I do with my hands, my actions will demonstrate what my attitudes are, and my attitudes demonstrate what my heart values are. We have to realize that even though personality is fixed like a fingerprint for life, character values can change, and we are responsible individually. I cannot choose your character values, for example, but I am responsible for my character values, just as each person is for his or her values. We can't blame anybody else for that.
So this is very important, because personality is one. That is like a fingerprint. We was born like this, is part of DNA, and a little bit could be changed, but this is our personality. But character, it's a set of values that we choose to adopt for our lives, and we are completely responsible for this set of values. And no one responsible, no parents, no other friends, because we choose. Now maybe you can talk about the character values. I saw in your materials you split these 10 essential character values, probably could be more, but you took the essential in two categories: personal responsibilities, that you mentioned, integrity, conviction, self-discipline, diligence, wisdom, and the next 5 character values are interpersonal respect values: loyalty, courage, humility, kindness, thankfulness. Let's talk about the first 5 personal responsibility set of values.
First of all, how did we get this list of maybe 100 character values that we see in the literature into something that is very, very concise, like 10 values, 10 core values? What we did is we examined the range of character values that we saw, taking them from everywhere that we found them. And there were maybe about 100 there. And then when we took out words that meant the same thing, like honesty and truthfulness, some would present those as different character values. We'd say, nope, those are the same. Boom. So we were able to cut those in half. So we had maybe 45 to 50 values that were distinctive. Then as we looked at that group of 45 or 50 values, we realized that they fell into groups. And there were 10 different groups of values. Some would show themselves in 3 or 4 different ways, some in 4 or 5 different ways. But much like you go through an algebra process to take a long formula and put it into a short formula because of parentheses, we took this long list of character values that were as comprehensive as we could find, and then made them into or fit them into these 10 groups. Then we discovered, as we looked at that 5 of those groups really help a person become stronger in their personal responsibility, focusing on wisdom, that is, living wisely, making wise choices. It involves integrity. It involves courage, as you mentioned. There are 5 there. And then there are 5 others that focus on how we relate to each other. So the 2 goals that we saw coming from this study of all of these character values was we want to help ourselves and others grow in personal responsibility instead of blaming somebody else. And we want to grow in our ability to be respectful to others, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their bank account, regardless of their position in an authority structure. And that's how it developed.
Interesting, you summarize all this. Maybe if you feel to underline some of them, because this split into personal responsibility, we don't like it's our own responsibility.
Nope.
Because integrity or self-discipline or diligence, wisdom, it's our responsibility. It's something, and also respect, because respect means loyalty, courage, humility, kindness. And maybe you can apply for us here in Romania some of them.
Certainly.
Maybe talk about integrity, in fact.
Of course, yes.
You know, in Romania we have some an addition. We are in the Balkan area. So we have this kind of Balkanic way to be. So integrity is not exact. We have to redefine a little bit the integrity, for example.
Integrity is challenged in all societies, of course. We talk about the importance of integrity right here where we are today, but if you and I were talking in the Middle East, business people would tell you, to stay in business, I have to pay bribes. There's just, I can't get a piece of property to build a building on unless I pay a bribe. And there's all sorts of just personal gain from dishonest bribery there. Now, paying a reasonable price for property, of course, is absolutely fine. Doing a bribe on top of that is where the problem comes with integrity. As we deal with it in our life, no matter what country we're in, we describe integrity as showing that I can be trusted to do what is right and say what is true. Again, integrity we describe as doing what is right and saying what is true, often enough so that people find us trustworthy. That trust is a big, big factor. It's a huge factor in business. It's a huge factor in families. Any place that you want to put it in, any setting that you want to put it in, integrity, trustworthiness is often a big challenge. But if we become men and women of integrity, it's a big, big strength.
I have a question in my heart from probably some people who go in the church. They say my personal salvation is the most important thing for me, most important decision to have a personal relationship with God. This discussion about character, about integrity, will affect my salvation. Why it's important for me? Because yes, I spend my eternity with the Lord, and this discussion about character, integrity, about wisdom, discipline, other things here, it's not exact. How it will affect my salvation?
That's an excellent question, because some feel that we have to earn our salvation. The Bible says, no, you're only saved, you only become a child of mine, God is speaking, by my payment of the penalty for your sin. In order to do that, I needed a perfect sacrifice, so I allowed my very own Son, God the Son, who became Jesus on earth, to be killed as a sacrifice for you. The salvation that we enjoy is based on Jesus' sacrifice for us, on our acceptance that He paid that price, which is huge. None of us could have done it. Absolutely beyond us. So where does character fit in? Does it help us earn our salvation, like a little extra part after all that Jesus has done? No, the Bible says what Jesus did is sufficient. But we demonstrate the character of Jesus as proof that we have made that decision to follow Christ. So the coming to Christ in faith is one very, very important step. Never would we want to underestimate that. But how we live for Christ, how we live to honor God after we have made that decision to put our faith in Him for our future, is how we begin to focus on character. The whole point of living from the time that we come to Christ to the time that we go to heaven is to demonstrate in our lives the character that Jesus demonstrated in His. Not to earn favor with God, but to demonstrate and to worship Him, to demonstrate His impact in our lives. So as 1 Corinthians 13 mentions, as we talked about earlier there, this is how we show that it's real what we said when we said, I put my faith in Jesus Christ.
I have a practical question. Even I hesitate to ask you this because I have a lot of friends who are leaders in different churches, but you travel a lot and you came from outside and maybe have a courage to say. Give me as an example, what many Christians said, my leadership, my people who supposed to serve me are lack of character. So even I don't have a courage to give my 10% to the church because I'm afraid that they will not be administered correctly. How you give us some example? Well, how this lack of character, integrity, how this will affect the leadership of a church? Maybe even we lose some friends after this program.
Well, it's a brave question, but it's also one that in a way makes me very sad when I think about friends of mine and people who I have read about in the media who have been strong Christian leaders, great skills, great knowledge, but there was a problem with their character, whether it was taking money that was supposed to go to the church and they put it in their own pocket, or whether it was being unfaithful to their husband or wife, or whether it was getting addicted to a drug that's going to kill them if they don't stop. They had a problem with character, and it took them down. A church who has leaders who have serious character issues is in danger of falling apart. in that context, or despite saying that, the reality is that no one is perfect. We all live a life in which we need to be asking God's forgiveness. 1 John chapter 1 talks about these things and calls on us as individuals to take personal responsibility to confess to the Lord our shortcomings. But then the promise in that from 1 John is, if we have the courage and the humility to confess, God has the love and the grace to forgive. And He does that for us. So it's a way of healing the relationship that we sever when we fail in our character. So on one hand, we need to know no one's going to be perfect. On the other hand, we need to know that if people do not correct the problem that they have, if they don't face that problem of integrity or loyalty to their wife or husband, or that integrity of self-discipline to turn away from illegal drugs, that's going to be a big problem. We all need to be in the middle with humility, helping each other. Again, that's where in this area of character, we need to be the redwood trees that reach out and grab each other by the arm and hold each other strong and make each other accountable.
I want to insert here a very short contribution from a friend of ours, Walter Droppers. He is leading the European partners, and I asked him something about integrity, need of integrity in business and politics area in the whole Europe.
Christian values help society flourish. For example, when you talk about integrity or trustworthiness, you know, trust is the currency of business. We think money is the currency, but actually trust is the currency. When I cannot trust you, I cannot do business with you. So trustworthiness is very important. When I trust people, I don't need contracts. When I trust people, business becomes more easy, business becomes more fast, you can work more pragmatic. And it helps also that people know to count on you and that you fulfill what you promise. So I think trustworthiness is very important. I think another thing important for business is that we start to understand that business is not about making money, but about serving society. The actually business model always started with a client who had a need or a demand or wants something. I'm a smart entrepreneur, I think I can help him. And by serving him and by helping him, I make some money. And the money is more or less the result. It was not the goal. The goal was to serve the customer, to help him, because I love my fellow human beings. I love the customer, so love comes in. And the result is that I make money. But what happens over time, that becoming rich, making money, feels very comfortable. And I start to change my paradigm about business. It's not about serving the customer anymore, but it's about making money. But when the customer is not the goal of business anymore, but making money is the goal of business, where does that leave the customer? The customer only becomes an ATM machine, a machine where you take money from. So the customer is not important, and when the customer is not important anymore, then my service to the customer is not important anymore too. Only when the customer buys it, I will be satisfied. If the quality is poor, if the quality is not right, if the customer needs it, it's all not important. The only important thing is that he buys and that I receive money from it. And then you see that you come in a model of society and in a model of thinking that becomes a curse for society. Because then everyone try to cheat on each other, they try to bring the quality down or have the cheapest price and try to manipulate the customer that he starts buying. And so it's not about serving society anymore, it's only about making money. And nowadays you see some companies who operate in that way. For example, in pharmaceutical industry. They try to make a monopoly, so they buy all their competitors, and then they raise the price of medicine by maybe 1,000%. So imagine that a medicine, normally you pay $12.50 for a medicine, and now you pay 350 euros because only they have a monopoly. So it's not about serving society with your medicine or healing people with your medicine, it's only about making money. And it's not a blessing for society. So when this starts to motivate people, and people are driven by making money, you're slowly killing society and killing well-being. So what should be the change? What should be a different model about making money? I think a different model, what we today call is a purpose economy and economics of mutuality. And purpose economy makes that is not making money is the core of your business, but a purpose, a meaning is the core of your business. For example, in the Netherlands we have a company who produce chocolate bars. Business is that they would like to have 100% slave-free chocolate bar. You know, they produce cacao in Africa, they use children to labor, they don't pay the children, and they said we want to have a chocolate bar who is 100% free of slavery. They started in, I think, 2005, and they are now market leader in the Netherlands. Only because by having this phrase and working out of a purpose into this business. And nowadays, big companies would like to use the same platform because they want also produce chocolate bars who are free of child labor and slavery. And big grocery chains start to use their platform. So by having a purpose and also by delivering a good product, that's the way they live. So the why question, why they do their business, becomes that important that it is becoming a business model.
It was water droppers with a short contribution to our discussion, because we want to ask you at the end about this, how you can define lack of integrity, lack of character in a big business and in a politics state area. Because we know here, we say it's Romania, the biggest problem in Romania, talking about our political leaders, are lack of integrity. But what other people said in the church, we want to separate our life from the politics, from the public life, because they have to do compromise. We stay here on Sunday morning in the church. We spend more and more our life in the church, trying to don't interfere with the public area. Maybe to address these issues of character to the public area.
The issue of separation from those who are not followers of God has gone on for centuries, hasn't it? And there have been monasteries back to the time of Christ where people pulled away from everybody else, thinking that that was the best way to honor God, and not be contaminated by the evil, the bad choices, the bad character around them. But the problem they found is that even in those monasteries there are problems with character. So it was not an issue of separation, it was an issue, separation happened, but the battle was still lost because it's an individual dedication. It's an issue of how committed we are to honoring the God that we learn about in the Bible. If we could live 1 Corinthians 13 in a monastery, but not in the rest of the world, things might change. But the fact is, we are challenged, no matter where we are, to live 1 Corinthians 13, that whole chapter, a beautiful chapter about the challenge, the character challenge of demonstrating that God's love is in our heart. We can do that in either a totally secular context, a very difficult one, just as the church in Rome was experiencing at the time that Paul wrote to them. Nero was a vicious emperor, and there were other leaders in the same era who were absolutely evil. And he didn't talk about retiring from them, escaping from them. He said, no, take them on, move ahead, but walk in a manner worthy of your calling as a child of God. That's what we have to do as well. I'm reminded of a very practical verse that I probably think about weekly in the Gospel of Matthew when Jesus was talking to those around him. And he says, you are the light of the world. Here are the disciples sitting at his feet saying, what do we do? What is it you want us to do for you? He says, you are the light of the world. And then a couple verses later, is Matthew 5:14 through 16 that we're talking about. He says, let your light so shine, let your light shine so brightly that others will see your good works, your good character, and glorify God in heaven, the Father in heaven. So he did not say, retreat and build a retreat center and spend the rest of your life in a retreat center. He said, no, go where you need the light to shine. You can't see a candlelight very well in a well-lit room. You have to go to a dark room, and that's where you can let your light so shine that people will see your good works and then glorify your Father in heaven. So we're called to be part of the world around us, even if it is very, very challenging.
For the last 2 minutes of our program, I have a final question. You came here in 2003, and you saw at that time, even when you started your program, your ministry, you saw a big need for character and integrity as a teaching. You came with a teaching perspective on this in Romania. How you see Romania now? It's a difference in your perspective from 2003 when you first visited in Romania, talking about character and integrity in the Romanian society, church, public area.
Well, let me say, first of all, what began in Romania, those about 15 or 16 years ago, has now gone to many different countries around the world. I've had the privilege of being in probably 20 countries on 5 continents teaching these things because, again, people are people and we all have the same needs. What have I seen in Romania during this time? I think the country has had to go through so much trauma over the last 30, 40, 50 years that it takes a little bit of time to almost breathe easier as a country because it's been restricted so long. It's like, how do we get used to the freedom and the responsibility that comes with freedom that we have today? I think that there's evidence that it's growing, and one of the things that I am very delighted about is as I meet with Christian leaders, ministry leaders in the, particularly I've been on the west side, but that doesn't mean that on the east side of the country, those people are not, other people are not very involved also. What I've seen though is ministry opening up in ways that must bring a smile to God's eyes, to God's face. To be able to see what you're doing through Alpha Omega, to see what seminaries and churches are doing is very, very special. There's a lot to be thankful for, even when there's an awful lot of challenge. We will always have a certain amount of challenge, but I believe we always have more to be thankful for than to complain about. And I believe that God wants, I know He wants to see this continue, but I believe strongly He is blessing things that have begun through people who have given their heart to Him and devoted their lives to Him.
Thank you so much for this encouragement. I hope this program was a reason to have a smile on God's face and a challenge for our people, because we talked today about this very sensitive topic here in Romania about character, integrity in a church and in a public area. Thank you so much and welcome. Maybe next year in Romania to extend our discussion about integrity, character in Romania.
Well, today's been a big privilege, and if we do it again, it'll be another blessing to do, serve with you.
This was a special program about character and integrity in church and in a public area with our special guest, John Garmo. May God bless you.